Hello and welcome to the third lecture of this online training program on foundational education leadership for early childhood care and education. In this third lecture, we are going to discuss about a life cycle approach to education. In the first two lectures, as we have already discussed about what an education leader should do and what are the characteristic and facet of an education leader, as well as we have discussed what will be our framework of education system, that is the Harvard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory as opposed to the general intelligence theory, which drives the education systems in general. So that will be the transition which we are taking and we are suggesting in design and delivery of education systems in general. So that is how our life cycle also will be different from the life cycle of education systems which are already existing. So we propose a different kind of education system which has the following stages as outlined here. So we propose a stages model of education system, and the education system does not only pauses and talk about to its participants about how to benefit from the education system, but it also talks about to its participant about how to contribute, because it is always a question of how much you contribute to any system. That is how a system grows. So a system will grow when the contribution to the system is more than what you gain out of the system. So then only the system will grow. Otherwise, what will happen? You extract more and contribute less, then the system will start declining. So that is the kind of a framework we are trying to inculcate here. So in this stages model, if you look at the first three stages are the stages from which the participants benefit, and obviously there are teacher leaders who contribute to the participants benefit in this stage. Then the performance stage is one in which the final performance takes place and the experience is gained by the participant, and the fifth and the sixth stage is where there is a transition of the teacher of the participant and the gainer of the from the education system, or the pupil or the student, from a trainee to a trainer, and then how he becomes and evolves into a master trainer. So this is the kind of a stages model which not only talks about that how to benefit from the education system, but also how to contribute to the education system. So the first stage is the exposure stage, which we will discuss in greater detail a little later. The second stage is the identification stage. The third is the nurturing stage from novice to master, and the 10,000 hour rule. It is the stage which is a lot talked about, but it is mistaken in our education system. What we do in our current education system is we start training people in different domains without even identifying what their interest, inclination and passion is. So what happens is this 10,000 rule, our rule does not apply to all the individuals, because what happens, these people are, we are throwing darts in dark, and we have not identified that these are the right kind of people to be trained in this kind of a domain. If we are able to do so, then this kind of a nurturing will help them become from a novice to a master in that domain, but that does not happen. So in the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, he outlines this 10,000 hour rule, but I will also contend this in some regards. So I will go to that in the fourth lecture, and some parts of it will also be discussed in this lecture as well. So that will be coming a little later. Then comes the performance stage and the skill of continual learning. That is also very important, because what happens is when you are performing, then also a continuous learning is required, and lot of relearning and new learning is required, because the skills are changing, and at the highest stage always new skills are coming up. new technologies are coming up. Say for example, in the information technology domain itself, new technologies of machine learning and data science and artificial intelligence have come up, and new jobs in that domain are coming up. So all the individuals who are working in information technology sector have to adopt to that kind of a change. So that is a thing of the future. So that is going to happen, and those kind of changes have to be adopted. So that has to be done in real time when you are in the performance stage, when you are already a performer, you are already a professional. Say for example, you are a cricketer, say for example Virat Kohli, and a reverse swing gets invented, or a new kind of bowling technique, maybe a tisra gets invented, then what to do? You have to come up with a new kind of batting technique to counter that, and you have to do it in real time. You can't wait that you have some kind of technology, someone will come and tell you. So you have to do it yourself. Obviously there will be coaches and there will be other advisors who will be available to you, and all the advices will be available, but finally you have to do it yourself, and new technologies have to be invented yourself. So these are the kind of changes and skills of continual learning that has to be possessed by any individual who is a professional. Then transitioning from trainee to trainer is also a very important and primordial skills for the contributing to the education system, as we already talked about, and evolving into a master trainer. So these are very important uh, indicators of how the education system grows, thrives, and becomes more expansive. So that is what we have to understand. So with this kind of a background, let us now go to the details of each and every stage of the education process and the stages model of the education process. Coming to the exposure stage. In the exposure stage, if you look at, there should be diversity in curricula based on multiple intelligence in human beings. So one of the primary things which we have been talking about, that there are 8 kind of intelligences in human beings that are there. Say which you already know, so I need not outline it every time, right? So the intelligences, say for example, are visual, spatial, then it is also maybe interpersonal, intrapersonal, then kinesthetic, uh, etc., etc., right? So linguistic. So all these intelligences are there. So the curricula that has to be designed needs to be diverse in that sense, and that diversity of curricula needs to be reflected. Because if you don't expose the human beings at the very first stage, when they are getting acquainted to the, when the child is born and now he is coming to the educational process, so he needs to understand, he has certain kinds of features already coming by way of genetics, but you need to acquaint him to what is available and what this world is offering to him, what kind of opportunities are being offered and what kind of possibilities are being offered. There is limitation not by virtue of the capabilities of the child, but by way of our design of the education system, our design of labor markets, our design of the whole economic system, and the way it is designed. So that limits the potential of human beings. So that limit has to be expanded, but it also needs to be put forth to the children, so that they know that these are the possibilities that are there for me. And once those possibilities they are exposed, and how they are going to be exposed, they have to be exposed to those possibilities through pedagogies of action, and not through pedagogies of lecture, or through videos or technological equipments and all that. because pedagogies of action is the one thing. So if someone tells me something, I forget. If I do something, I remember. If I participate in something, I learn. So that is the kind of the old Chinese proverb. So that is what we need to remember, that pedagogies of action has to be cultivated and pedagogies of action has to be put in place. So that is what has to be done. The third thing, very importantly, that technology use has to be kept to the minimum. Technology is not at all required at this stage. Obviously, for entertainment sake, there can be some exposure to technology, and today's children, because of availability of a lot of gadgets in their home environment, they are going to learn technology, and their they are going to get exposed to it as well as to their negative aspects very quickly. But you need to curtail that technology use to the very minimal, and the teacher, leader or guide can use technology as a support system, but it must be avoided for children of this age group in terms of using it as a real time pedagogy. So the pedagogy should be, and the it relates also to the diversity in curricula. So diversity in curricula also means that there should be training in music, there should be exposure in music. So their technology can be used. They should be trained to, they should be exposed to music. Music should be played to them so that they understand that what are the tuning, what is a rhythmic kind of a sound, and how it is different from a normal sound. So those kind of things should be. So similarly, they should be exposed to kinesthetic intelligences, different kind of sports activities should be conducted, because these are very important. They should be allowed to meet different kinds of people. They should also be exposed to the natural environment. This In this COVID era, a lot of children are confined to their homes, so it should not be like that. They need to get exposed with appropriate care. They need to go to the natural environment, nature. They need to watch that and understand what nature is, what plants are, what birds are saying, chirping of birds and all that, because that is another kind of naturalistic intelligence that grows in children. And as we have already talked about, that 85% of the intelligence of the children is going to, and the brain development is going to happen in this age only, 3 to 6 years. So this is very important age in which these all kind of exposures is provided to those children, because through brain only all the functionalities are controlled, whether it be physical or maybe the thinking abilities. So all those things are controlled, or the musical intelligence. So everything is controlled through brain. So brain needs to get exposed to all these kinds of intelligence. And repetition as a strategy is also very important to gauge both interest and expertise. So repetition is also very important. So you need to repeat things in the curriculum as and when. So you need to plan a curriculum in which all the intelligences are there. So in one column, if you put the intelligences should be there, and in another column a timeline should be there. A timeline maybe a weekly timeline or a monthly timeline, and then these intelligences need to get repeated over a period of time, and that repetition should happen through the course of these 5 years. And that is where the exposure part is happening. So this is how the exposure stage has to be considered: diversity in curricula, pedagogies of action, technology used to the very minimal, and repetition as a strategy. So these are the things to be kept in mind. Coming to the identification stage, it is similar to the exposure stage in terms of curricular diversity and pedagogy. We have already talked about curricular diversity in the exposure stage. So the stage is going to be nothing different, and the period of identification stage is also quite similar. Maybe in the later years of the exposure stage, the identification stage becomes more predominant, but the exposure stage and the identification stage go hand in hand to a large extent. And pedagogy of action is very important. The student or the pupil has to be put in action with regards to his musical or rhythmic intelligence, kinesthetic intelligence, analytical intelligence, or linguistic intelligence, or naturalistic intelligence, interpersonal, intrapersonal intelligence. So whatever intelligence he or she possesses, he needs to be put in action. So through action it needs to be judged. The second and most important part of the identification stage is inclusion of strategies of competition and collaboration. So why competition? Because then only a certain amount of comparison is required, because on the basis of comparison only you judge who is better, who is performing worse in a certain kind of intelligence. So on the basis of that you can understand that this child has certain kind of predilection or capability towards this kind of a intelligence. And collaboration is required because lot of these intelligences also require a certain kind of teamwork. So a teamwork in the sense that these intelligences have to be put in use in a teamwork kind of a scenario. So that is why inclusion of strategies of competition and collaboration while deciding on the pedagogy has to be put in place. Again, repeating the fact of technology used to the minimum. So now what is happening is we are talking about technology use and technology. We are in the era of technology, and 21st century is the era of technology. So we should use technology to the very to a large extent, and lot of talks are being held, and even for foundational education people are talking about how to do foundational education through Zoom platform, WhatsApp and other technologies. I totally contend this view, and I say the technology use has to be kept to the minimal, and it has to be a mediator between the child and the teacher leader. The teacher leader, for his or her own knowledge and for his or her development of the generalist orientation, can use the technology, but child has to be kept away from technology as far as possible. So that is very important advice that I am trying to give to all the teacher leaders through this training program. And attitudinal development and habit inculcation. So attitudinal development and habit inculcation again goes back to this whole idea of repetition cycle, so, that we talked about in the exposure stage. So repetition cycle, and here I will talk about the 21-day rule. So the kind of habits we are trying to develop for our students, pupil or children, we need to think about a 21-day rule, that they need to repeatedly do whatever habit they need to develop for at least 21 days, and then a habit, certain kind of a algorithm will develop in their minds that this I have to do every day. So this kind of a attitude has to be developed in them. So habit will develop because of this, and an attitude towards how to develop an habit will also develop. So that is very important. So these are some of the facets of the identification stage. Coming to the nurturing stage, which we will talk in greater detail in the next lecture, that is lecture 4, and how a novice becomes a master, and the 10,000 hour rule. So if you look at the whole life cycle of a human being, assuming around 70 odd hours, 70 odd years of lifetime, it is approximately 6 lakh hours of lifetime. So in that 10,000 hours is only about how much percentage? It is nothing but around 1.4 percentage to 2 percentage of the whole lifetime. So devoting 2 percentage of the whole lifetime to develop the expertise which is going to give you a gainful career, as well as the career you want and the expertise you want, is a very important thing to do, and to devote time to that kind of a endeavor is always suggested. So as outlined in the book Outliers, the 10,000 rule is very important. As outlined that it is only 2% of the lifetime and 2% of the lifetime. So 2 or 3 expertise, if you think, can be developed or nurtured during a lifetime, which from a becoming a from a novice to a master in some 2 or 3 facets. So that can be done. We contend, however, that there are no outliers or gifted ones. As we have already talked about, that there are no gifted children or there are no outliers. Only the system fails to identify the outlieredness or the giftedness. So that is what the system needs to correct itself in terms of what is the giftedness in the pupil or the student or the child who has come to the system. So that is what needs to be understood in greater detail. It is because of throwing darts in different direction at the crucial stage that mastery in one field is not attained by an individual easily. So if you look at the current education system, what is happening is the person is not able to identify what I am made for and what I am going to do with my life, and that does not get decided even at later stages. And because of that, and many a times it is not because of choice but because of chance, people choose a certain career. So that kind of a framework is not suitable. So the suitable way of doing this is by choosing a career in which the person is already sure that this is the kind of career I want to pursue, this is the career I want to pursue, and then the energy can be channelized in a very focused manner. Otherwise, these curious cases of unchannelized energy utilization can happen, and because of that, the mastery cannot get developed even after lot of hard work. Even after spending 30,000 hours or maybe 50,000 hours, the mastery does not get developed. And the reason being that the area of expertise or what you want to do with your life is not decided properly. So we will discuss this in greater detail in the fourth lecture. Availability of modern technology plays a very important role here. So I have been cautioning against technology till now, in the exposure stage, in the identification stage, but in the nurturing stage I would say that technology and modern technology is going to play a very important role, because the teacher leader to whom you have access to has his or her own limitations, right, in terms of mastery of the skill set which you are trying to master. But if he has certain kinds of facets that he is ready to help you, then what happens is, to develop these kind of skill sets you can take help of technology, what the people who are the best in this field are doing, in this domain are doing, and technology can be of great help in this regard. And it is a dual process though, that people who are in are successful in a certain domain need to create videos and extensive videos of how they develop their skills, as well as there it is kind of a, there need to be seekers who want to know how these people have developed. So there needs to be seekers as well as there need to be providers. So it is going to be a two-way affair. Moving further, the performance stage and the skill of continual learning. So learning does not stop at the mastery stage. So you never become a master. I would like to quote here that, and I have already quoted earlier also, that no educative process is ever the end. You should never forget this, that no educative process is ever the end. It is always the beginning of more education, more learning, and more living. So if you develop an attitude towards education in that sense, then you will understand that the skill of continual learning is very, very important. Learning to learn is a key skill in the current era, and in any era for that matter. Even in the olden era, it has been a very important skill. Modern technology use crucial for continual skill development and maintaining expertise in the identified domain. So modern technology use is very, very important at the performance stage, at the nurturing stage, as well as at the performance stage. Pedagogies of unlearning and relearning new skills in the fast-changing and dynamic environment. So the environments are such, the performance environments currently are such in any domain for that matter, that you need to continuously learn, relearn, and unlearn certain things. So learn, unlearn, and relearn certain things. So that is why you need to be dynamic in your approach towards learning. So that is very, very important. And finally, you as pupil as well as education leaders need to develop this ability to cope with failures and move on when time comes. So you need to identify when the time has come and then move on, because there are other facets of education that you can contribute to. Always don't see education as a opportunity for gain. Also see education as an opportunity to contribute to the society, and in that sense ability to cope up with failures is very, very important, and moving on from trainee to a trainer is also quite important in that regard. Transitioning from trainee to trainer, the 6 key skills or facets of an education leader that we talked about in this first lecture itself is very, very important, and most of it comes from experience and sweating in the field or domain. And a person who has moved through the education cycle, and especially through the performance stage, will have that kind of experience. So that is very important for transitioning from a trainee to a trainer. Most important of these facets is experiences of failure, and as well as a certain kind of empathy and solicitousness. So that is very, very important. Things like process orientation, delta CAS, that is knowledge, attitude, skills, and habits, and broadening the spectrum from specialist to generalist happens in due course. So these are some of the things which fall in place, but important thing are that you have experiences of failure, you have a certain kind of empathy and solicitousness. How you become a master trainer? The reorientation from specialist to a generalist is an important thing to happen, and that if that happens, then you become a master trainer. Respect, empathy, and appreciation for other kinds of intelligence. You might be an expert or a certain reached a certain kind of a level in certain kind of intelligence, but you must have respect, empathy, and appreciation for other kinds of intelligence. If you don't have this kind of a facet, then you are not fit for a education leader. And finally, solicitousness, that relates to the appreciation aspect of other kinds of intelligences. So these are the some of the things that you need to possess as education leaders and future education leaders. So with this, I would like to move further. Thank you. In the next lecture, what we will be talking about is we will be understanding the stages from novice to master, and we will be delving deeper into this whole idea of how to become a master from a novice and the nurturing stage of the education process itself. So with this, I close this and look forward to see you all.